world is unfair, isn't it? This boy was just a child learning magic, but he was used as an experiment by the nobles of the Magic Tower. After enduring 7 years of despair, he finally breaks his limits by tapping into the tower's source of power and becomes a limit-breaking mage. Our story begins by showing a great tower in the sky. Inside its darkness, a groan of pain echoed. Moments later, a harsh voice ordered the subject to pull himself together, stating that they were only just beginning and he could not faint. With that, another stimulant was injected, provoking an intense scream. The same voice then noted that the effect had lasted 461 seconds, and that the current region was producing promising results. Bloodied, the body of the test subject struggled to breathe, while someone commented that an experimental talent was indeed different. In the Bohemia Magic Tower, he remained chained, while those around him celebrated the success of the stimulant that had activated the magic circle and suppressed immunization. With weakened eyes, he looked around, aware that he was inside the most powerful tower of the Empire. With difficulty, he thought he was slowly dying. Surrounded by laboratory equipment, he questioned the reason for all of it. Facing a container of ants, he wondered why someone with a brilliant mind had ended up in such a state. One ant moved and a voice declared, "Now good." At that instant, the stimulant was forced to manifest within his body, provoking an expression of extreme pain. In agony, he screamed for them to stop while a purple energy enveloped him. With his chained, bloodied hand, he begged desperately. The Tower Master complained about the noise, demanding a report at the end of the experiment, which a subordinate promptly acknowledged. Suspended and wounded, the prisoner breathed with difficulty. He asked himself why he was dying in that place, precisely where he had always dreamed of being. Someone grabbed his face, ordering him to compose himself. Mockingly, a man asked how Verdun was feeling, claiming that he had no real talent for magic and only boasted of being clever. Thus, Weller explained that the boy's life force and knowledge were being extracted in the secret laboratory. He then urged him to act as he once had, telling him to speak like the smart boy again. Another voice remarked that in his state, he probably could not even faint. Meanwhile, someone else asked if he could still hear anything. Weller pressed on, asking if he was deaf and where he was looking. At that moment, he noticed the experimental ants had gotten loose and scolded his subordinates for failing to contain them, receiving clumsy apologies in return. Irritated, he called them idiots and stomped his foot. He thought of Verdun as an insect, incapable of breaking even a single chain without magical power, making him a perfect S-level specimen. Soon after, a voice revealed that Ravelin, Verdun's friend, had entered the tower with sponsorship to study abroad, and others mocked him for having such company. Amid the chaos, Verdun wondered why all of this was happening, while a crushed ant lay on the floor. He gave a bitter smile, finally understanding the whole situation. Seeing this, the researchers laughed and the young man tried to speak. Weller asked what he was muttering. In response, Verdun shouted furiously, convinced that everything was happening because of his weakness. All that misfortune had begun 15 years earlier. Raised in an orphanage, he dreamed of becoming a great mage and entered the tower as an ordinary worker, but he had never been able to fulfill that desire. This was because his growth limit was rank I. At the age of 7, his magical compatibility test revealed a complete absence of talent, an immediate death sentence for his dream. Even so, Verdun did not give up, for his only wish was to become a mage. He secretly peeked into spellbooks while working in the tower. He also studied countless volumes in the library, confident in his intelligence even without significant magical power. A few years later, with his brilliance finally recognized, he earned the position of researcher in the Magic Tower. A colleague praised him, saying he was more than a genius, capable of feats that even Master Balrog would acknowledge. It was then that he realized his mind was not just gifted, but something close to true genius. He thanked Lucart, saying that he still needed to prove the thesis before presenting it, but something made him hesitate. He asked if he was the first person Lucart had shown it to, and the answer was that he was the only one. With recognition from his closest friend, Verdun felt that he could finally become a true scholar of magic, leaving behind his past as a mere worker. But soon he declared that the thesis was his own, recounting how it had disappeared the day before its presentation, only for Lucart to submit it under his own name. Balrog Bessias, the Tower Master, asked if he was the author of the theory of multidimensional continuity, reflecting that such a thing could not be ignored. Stammering, Verdun tried to confirm, promising to explain everything from the beginning, while his superior looked surprised at the revelation. He was shocked to learn that no one among the common researchers even knew he existed. Bitterly, he regretted having gone to the Master that day. With a sinister smile, Balrog ordered him to report to the laboratory in 2 days, when the moon would be hidden. At that moment, Verdun wondered if, had he fled back then, he might have lived a normal life over the following 7 years. That was how he ended up forcibly confined in the Tower Master's laboratory, who insulted him for his stubbornness and promised to intensify the experiments. By day, he worked as a laborer. By night, he became a test subject. He was ordered to create magic circles, validate his own theory, inject drugs into his veins to observe reactions, and develop new potions to prove their effects. Furthermore, he was forced to dedicate his entire life to the tower, suffering deeply throughout the process. He knew no one would believe his truth, and all he received were threats against those he loved. Weeping, covered in blood, he believed everything had ended. As he lay in the cell, he questioned what else he could do. A flashback showed the young Verdun playing with Ravelin, who called out urgently while he asked his friend to wait. Then he remembered when a mage had called him worker, to which he had quickly responded. Soon after, Ravelin had invited him to become great mages together, sealing a promise between them. He thought, yes, things could have been different, as memories of that promise and of the tower blended together. If his growth potential had been just a little greater, perhaps his destiny would have been different. As the memory faded, he looked once more at his own blood-stained hands. Suddenly, he was back in the cell, staring at the bars with a terrified gaze. A hand tossed something on the ground, and a voice ordered him to admit everything. Covered in blood, he heard that this was the end. Then the cell floor revealed itself swarming with ants. Verdun once again heard that sound that always came with testing, and thought he no longer had the strength. Perhaps it would be better to die. On the ground, a crushed ant caught his attention, while a voice asked if he truly felt that way, insisting it was not over yet. The question was repeated as the ants swarmed into a dark mass, reminding him of vengeance and survival. His body trembled. The voice commanded him to endure, grit his teeth, and withstand everything again and again. Then he would be reborn, never to be trampled upon again, and to wield a great power. A cloaked figure, with its back to him, appeared before a glowing magic circle, as the voice affirmed that he would surpass his limits. Clenching his fist, he silently agreed. Looking at the moon through the window, he thought that it was not over yet. He needed to sharpen the blade of vengeance, honed for 7 years, until it was complete. He wondered if, by solving the last unresolved problem, everything could change. Faced with greater power, he realized that intelligence alone would not be enough. So he decided to challenge fate itself, redefining the theory and creating an unprecedented method of bodily reconstruction. Thus, with his bloodied hand, he activated the theory that defied the heavens. The magic circle glowed on the floor, signaling that the next day something would happen. Wounded, Verdun shone with an aura as he declared that tomorrow he would break his limits. From his hand emanated an intense energy, revealing that the theory of body reconstruction had been completed by embracing death. Meanwhile, kneeling in the cell, he thought that all that remained was to prove his theory. He reflected that he needed an artifact to cast magic just once, even if his body, devoid of mana, shattered in the process. With a determined gaze, he affirmed that on the following night he would reclaim his freedom. The long night faded, giving way to dawn of the magic tower, the day his plan would unfold. At that moment, a key turned in the lock. The door opened and a voice ordered him to clean the alchemy laboratory. Weller appeared, mocking his condition and demanding that the place be spotless before the festival. With his face bruised, Verdun merely stared in silence. Finally, he answered yes and walked toward the light outside the cell. In the laboratory, he began cleaning with a cloth and a container. Moments later, he turned in surprise as someone asked if he was cleaning alone. It was Revelin, smiling as she saw him, and she was recognized with astonishment. He asked what she was doing there, and the young woman revealed that she had come to say goodbye to a friend before departing. Remembering that she would study in the magical city of Virent, a privilege reserved for the greatest talents, he smiled. He wished her well while she observed him with a thoughtful look. Then Ravelin extended her hand and invited him to come with her to Virent. She explained that there he would not have to deal with arrogance and could find new opportunities. Embarrassed, she admitted she only wanted someone to talk to, and he responded by calling her name. With a faint smile, he said that he would remain there. She in turn looked at him with a disappointed expression. As a carriage departed from the tower, she promised she would write in letters. Back in the cell, he looked outside through the window, reflecting that she knew nothing. He kept thinking that Ravelin was completely unaware of what truly happened in that place. He lamented how much she ignored his suffering, until he heard a voice ordering him to follow urgently. Even while chained, he felt grateful that she was not involved in his plan. The Magic Festival, celebrating the construction of the tower and magic itself, turned the place into the most bustling spot of the day. During the event, he walked down a corridor, knowing that only lower-ranking mages remained there. Soon, a hand knocked on the door and a voice authorized him to enter. The administrator, upon seeing him, asked the reason for his presence, to which Verdun replied that he had been sent to clean the treasure vaults. Grumbling, the man said he should have asked permission and called him a pathetic fool. Even so, he allowed entry, warning him not to damage anything. Something promptly answered with a yes. The door opened, revealing the treasure chamber. His hand brushed lightly over a random surface. Then his fingers rested on a magical artifact. With a focused gaze, he activated the item to block any sound. Descending a spiraling staircase that glowed faintly, he declared that his plan began now. His steps echoed as he continued the descent. Finally, he reached his destination. A magic circle and a shining staff awaited him. The second circuit was a rare artificial artifact capable of casting triple spells and awakening latent talents. He declared that he needed the staff to execute his plan, and that he had to disable the protected magic circle. He revealed that it was a 7th level spell personally created by the Tower Master. As his hand extended, emanating energy, he affirmed that he had spent 7 years studying how to break that barrier. The magic circle shattered amid a blinding flash of light. Soon after, he raised the staff and proclaimed that he himself would be the one to destroy it. Elsewhere in the tower, bottles of alcohol were scattered, and someone cursed. Two mages grumbled about being the unlucky ones assigned to guard the source of power during the festival. One of them bearded believed he was enduring it with dignity, since by skill alone he should have been the one chosen. At that instant, the intruder appeared, and the bearded mage ordered him to fetch more drink, thinking the timing was perfect. The other mage remarked that once he became Tower Master, he would never touch that alcohol again, prompting laughter from his companion. With the staff in hand, the newcomer cast a determined look. The bearded man, excited, accepted the challenge of becoming Tower Master with enthusiasm. Suddenly, the other mage looked around in surprise at what was happening beside him. Not understanding, he demanded to know what Verdun was doing. When he saw the staff being brandished, he shouted furiously at the young man. Caught off guard, the youth hesitated at the unexpected reaction. Irritated, the mage grabbed his own staff and threatened to fix the fool's mind. Then he cast a third-level spell, the fearsome Titanic Wave. Watching the spell rush toward him, Verdun faced it firmly, acknowledging its power. In response, he invoked an earth spear against the advancing magic. The green-haired mage looked on, shocked as debris flew everywhere. He then fell to the floor, screaming in pain. Stunned and wounded, he asked how someone ranked at level 1 could cast magic. The assailant slowly approached, asking if he was shocked to see a test subject wielding spells. With a firm voice, he declared that this is what happens when one toys too much with people like him and with the tower. At the center of the room, he stood tall, while the two mages lay fallen, bleeding. Lifting his gaze, he reflected that it was his first time seeing the tower's heart so closely. Before him pulsed the power source of the magic tower, an object resembling a living heart. He revealed that it had taken him 7 years to reach that point, and that he would use the source's mana to initiate the technique called defying the heavens, even without knowing what would happen if he failed. On his back were elaborate magic circles tattooed, symbols of extreme preparation. He gripped the staff tightly, knowing that if he did not try, he would never discover the result. Then he struck the artifact into the center of the magic circle on the ground. There he stood, engulfed by an intense energy connecting him directly to the source. Meanwhile, the body reform began, surrounding him in a crackling aura. He shouted, defying the heavens, overtaken by a surge of blue energy that exploded around him. The source of the tower pulsed in response, illuminating everything with a brilliant blue light. A gigantic beam of energy erupted from the top of the tower, piercing the sky. In the distance, a carriage moved away, while the structure blazed with magical discharge. A silhouette watched the phenomenon from afar, noting that the energy came from the source. From the shadows, Balrog Bessias emerged, declaring that someone had invaded his magic tower. The vast explosion of energy from the tower engulfed the outer area in smoke and debris beneath the moonlight. Among the ruins, a figure coughed heavily, struggling to rise. With effort, he clutched the staff, trying to catch his breath as dense smoke surrounded him. Particles of energy trickled from his hand, and he believed the destruction should have wiped out everything. Even so, he knelt down, exhausted, realizing that the process had been a success. Suddenly, he lifted his gaze and saw in the night sky an intense light rapidly approaching. 3 blue magical projectiles cut through the air toward him, the sign that someone was coming. Above, surrounded by magic, appeared the Tower Master, Balrog Bessias, immediately recognized. Hovering in the air, he observed the devastated area with sharp eyes, questioning whether he had felt the fate of his guards. He extended his hand, gathering a concentrated blue energy that began to swirl around his fingers. A condensed blast erupted from his palm, crashing violently against the ground. The smoke partially cleared, revealing the silhouette of the one who had survived. Descending the firm steps, Balrog surveyed everything with an expression filled with fury and determination. His eyes stopped upon a teleportation circle on the ground, which shocked him. Grinding his teeth, he could not accept that anyone dared touch his precious tower. Stomping hard, cloaked in a purple magical aura, he thundered that it mattered little who the intruder was. He declared that whether it was the Emperor himself or a mere child, the culprit would pay dearly for the affront. Seething with rage, he swore he would find the one responsible and kill them mercilessly. His fury was so great that the sky above the tower darkened with a devastating electric storm. At the same time, beneath the sunny blue sky, a body lay motionless, overcome with exhaustion. He wanted only to remain lying there, but the sound of running water stirred him awake. Suddenly, he panicked upon realizing that he was completely submerged, confused by the situation. He looked around, unable to understand where he had ended up, for he remembered being on the run. When he saw his reflection on the surface of the water, he was struck with shock. He touched his own face in astonishment, unable to comprehend the change. His hair, once brown, had turned a silvery gray, nearly silver. His eyes now glowed with a vivid light blue hue, replacing his once dark pupils. He questioned whether he had become someone else, fearing that something had gone wrong with the reconstruction. Then he remembered that after completing the body reform, he had used teleportation magic to escape before Balrog could reach him. From that, he concluded the spell had cast him into an entirely unknown location. Looking around, he realized the forest and its plants were completely unfamiliar, proof that he had been transported far away. A smile formed on his face when he realized that the spell had carried him successfully across half a continent. He laughed loudly, overcome with joy, having escaped and completed the body transformation. Lying on the damp grass, he imagined Balrog's fury, unable to track him after the tower's destruction. Yet even in satisfaction, he recognized that merely destroying the place would not be enough to bring down the magic tower. He knew Balrog, known as the Omnipotent, would certainly have countermeasures and would easily rise again even after losing his men. That was why he smiled with resolve, determined to grow stronger, while his enemy rebuilt everything. He raised his hand to the sky and swore to destroy every trace of what the old master had created. With a clenched fist, he declared that his vengeance and his proof of worth as a mage would be remembered in history. For now, he bid farewell to the magic tower in his heart. At that moment, a small goblin appeared among the trees, chopping wood carelessly. Now fully dressed, Verdun raised his hand and cast the spell Wind Blade. The cutting gust struck the goblin, which cried out in surprise before collapsing. He observed the lifeless body and the grass stained with blood. Despite the transformation, he felt no real difference in his power. He concluded that something had gone wrong with the reconstruction, as neither his mana nor his body reflected what he had expected. Without understanding the cause of the failure, he found the situation troublesome, especially being far from any village. Soon ahead, he spotted tracks on the ground. Kneeling, he carefully examined the skid marks of a cart and a box left behind. With a gesture, he activated mana detection on the object, determined to find its owner. A strong blue aura burst from his hands, revealing a magical trail spreading through the forest. In the distance, a wagon pulled by 2 horses raced frantically along the path. The driver shouted, forcing the animals to run faster. He cursed, seized by panic and confusion at the situation. In his mind, he recalled the ambush they had suffered from bandits. He tried to negotiate but failed, and his mercenaries had fooled without hesitation. Yet the worst had not been the bandits, but the appearance of an orc with a cruel smile that terrified him. By sheer luck, the creature had turned against the attackers themselves, allowing his escape. The wagon barreled down the road in desperation, for if the orc had not been distracted, he would already be dead. A sound behind him made him shudder, fearing he was being pursued. He whipped the horses in panic, begging them to run faster. Suddenly, a wheel struck a log, flipping the wagon. The man was hurled to the ground, screaming in pain as his back slammed into the earth. With difficulty, he pushed himself up, still dazed, until he froze at what lay ahead. From the dark underbrush, glowing eyes appeared in the shadows. Orcs and goblins with crimson eyes emerged from the woods surrounding him. Stunned, he fell to his knees, unable to believe he would die to monsters. The creatures advanced slowly, ready to strike. In a cry of despair, he accepted his end and shut his eyes. But in the next moment, an earth wall rose around him, trapping him and barring the monsters. Atop the wall, his savior stood, realizing he had forgotten to leave an opening for air. One of the larger orcs grinned wickedly, its red eyes glowing with intensity. From above, Verdun assessed the situation, knowing he had to act before the man suffocated. He gathered energy in his hands and conjured a fireball, aware that this would be his first real battle. The orc roared in fury at the wall of earth, his eyes blazing with hatred. With a cold smile, Verdun extended his flaming hands, eager to finally test his new abilities. Verdun unleashed flames that consumed the surrounding trees. As he fired multiple flaming arrows, the enemies were struck by fire. Amid the blaze, a larger orc stood out among the goblins. The enraged monster roared as the others fell around him. Immediately after, he charged at the archer, who watched from a distance. While conjuring multiple magic circles in his hands, Verdun prepared to unleash spells of fire and wind. With that, he activated dual casting to intensify his attacks. In succession, several waves of searing arrows appeared and struck the goblins on the ground. The explosive flames consumed the enemies completely. Many of them disintegrated into dust after the impact. At that moment, Verdun realized even he was surprising himself, for in the past he would not have slain a single goblin. Seeing that none of the monsters had survived, he drew a deep breath. He then thought he needed to get Mabu out of there before he fainted, for saving him would otherwise be in vain. However, a massive creature emerged from behind. Turning abruptly, he was startled by the unexpected presence. It was then he noticed one of the monsters was still alive, leaving behind a trail of blood. After some time, the coachman resumed his journey with the wagon along the road. Conrad expressed his admiration, saying he would never forget what had happened that day. He stated that without help, he would not have survived and asked how he could repay the debt. In response, Verdun told him to keep his eyes on the road or else he would overturn the carriage again. Conrad quickly nodded. Curious, Conrad asked if the battle had been dangerous, but the other thought the man spoke too much. Even so, he admitted inwardly that it had indeed been somewhat dangerous. Noticing yet another monster still alive, he prepared to strike, a blue glow forming in his hand. A cutting gust of wind then struck the creature, cleaving its head in two. With a faint smile, he remarked that there was nothing to worry about. The coachman then asked if bandits ever appeared in those parts and was told that none had ever been seen. Surveying the surroundings, Verdun realized the forest was under the control of Baron Pathy. Conrad explained that he had connections with the Baron, and that the bandits in the area had already been dealt with. The traveler thought that the coachman's luck had run out, for the teleportation had placed him directly in Paity's territory. He decided then to conceal his identity and grow stronger, for the magic tower might soon be searching for him. Snapped back to reality, he realized he had not yet introduced himself. Smiling, Asher revealed his name. He explained that he would use Verdun only when facing the tower master, while the Baron's estate came into view. That night, a man in shock asked Conrad what had happened to him. Laughing, Conrad answered that he had lost weight while running from the orcs. The man asked if he was well, since both bandits and beasts had attacked, but Conrad said it had not been his fault. The man noticed Asher, asking if he was the mage who had saved his friend, and said he could not remain idle before his savior. Without hesitation, he ordered Asher to enter the castle. Bowing, the young mage thanked him for the clothes, food, and a place to sleep. Baron Pate smiled, welcoming him warmly. He then introduced himself as Henrod and invited him to sit. During the meal, Henrod asked if the food pleased him, receiving an enthusiastic compliment in response. Soon after, he offered 5 million coins for the help rendered, but said he needed something important in return. With a direct tone, he proposed a task and promised a worthy reward. Thinking of his need for money and training, the mage showed interest and asked about the mission. Henrod explained that bodies had been found and that a nearby town lay in ruins. He went on, revealing that it had been the work of bandits. However, no clues had been left behind, as if the criminals had vanished through magic. The Baron speculated that perhaps a mage was among them, and his guest asked when the hunt would begin. Smiling calmly, Henrod replied that they would depart in 4 days. At that moment, a knight introduced himself as Enoch, commander of the operation. Shortly after, Harris and the young Peric also identified themselves, greeting the newcomer. He in turn responded politely, saying it was a pleasure to meet them. Though the proposal seemed unusual, he considered the opportunity valuable, since it would cover his stay, while the host denied any intent to exploit him. Curious, the mage asked Enoch whether the others would also join the mission and received confirmation that they were all adventurers. The commander explained that the group had formed because of rumors about a strange orc. The bounty for the hunt was high, attracting even veteran gold-rank adventurers. These adventurers were capable of wielding energy and, according to rumors, could slice through mountains. Walking deep in thought, Asher wondered why they still needed him when 3 experienced knights were already in the party. At that moment, Enoch asked for his help to confirm whether there truly was a mage among the enemies, which led to another question: why was he essential? The commander explained that second-level mages were equivalent to knights, but their long-range spells made it difficult to approach them. Immediately after, Enoch reacted with concern, realizing that this would be a serious problem. Meanwhile, the mage stopped, observing the silent forest around them. Pointing at a magic circle ahead, he began to prepare to dispel it. Suddenly, several red circles appeared in response. The group was startled by the sudden appearance of the magic, questioning how it could exist within the controlled territory. Calmly, he explained that the detected spell was a camouflage and the barrier a warning. He then asked everyone to retreat so he could safely deactivate it. A blue glow enveloped his hand as he struck against the new red circle. Enoch, vigilant, observed every movement in awe. Inwardly, he wondered how that mage could unravel such complex enchantments with such ease. Explorers were members of guilds who accepted missions across the continent. Death constantly accompanied them, but skill could bring wealth and fame. Yet some were corrupted by desire and eventually turned into bandits, turning their blades against their own kind. One such fugitive, Varja, voiced his frustration in the forest beside his companion. Both lamented the chaos caused by their last raid and the lack of food after the orc attack. In that tense atmosphere, he scolded the group, demanding that they stop watching idly and go out to hunt something. Meanwhile, Enoch and one of the knights assessed the situation from afar, convinced they had found their targets and merely awaiting orders. As soon as the commander suggested an immediate strike, he was interrupted. In a firm tone, the mage explained that he had been sent as a countermeasure against spellcasters, stressing that they needed to evaluate the enemy carefully, for facing someone stronger could seal their defeat. Although concerned about the bandits' possible movements, Enoch fell silent, watching his companion reflect quietly. Soon after, the mage revealed he had an idea for dealing with the situation. At the same time, the leader of the fugitives complained to Vilshan about losing one of their subordinates. In response, his ally urged him to consider an alternative. The bandit bitterly lamented that a wild orc had wiped out his men, recalling his days as an explorer and the moment he had killed another out of greed. Trying to resolve the impasse, he suggested attacking another village, but his partner objected, reminding him that the Baron had been enraged by the bodies hanging from trees. Furthermore, he warned of the fragility of their concealment magic and mentioned the proximity of Martis city. They were discussing raiding the village when a surge of energy ripped through the air. Shocked, Varja realized flames were closing in on all sides. A massive wave of fire and light swept across the area, revealing a magic circle around him. The criminals realized they had been discovered by magic, not by chance. The magical assault spread, striking several members of the group amid the chaos. In the confusion, Vilshan screamed in pain, his face wounded and staff clutched in hand. Alarmed, the leader rushed over and saw him collapse on the ground injured. He quickly understood that the mana barrier was weak and had rebounded with brutal impact against its caster. At that moment, the mage declared that he would deal with the enemy only after gauging their strength, words heard attentively by the commander. Enraged, the bandit chief shouted that the Baron wanted them dead for having hired a mage. Determined, he swore the noble's plans would never succeed and launched a fierce attack. His sword clashed against Enoch's in a metallic shock. Consumed by fury, he promised to send their heads to the Baron as retaliation. The knight only laughed at the threat, daring him to try. Meanwhile, Vilshan tried to flee but was intercepted by his foe, who raised an earth wall before him. Startled, the fugitive realized that even though his opponent was only a second circle mage, he could still chase him without resorting to flight. The pursuer then questioned why he remained, watching him prepare a magical response: multiple ice arrows. The projectiles struck hard, and the enemy believed it was enough to kill a mere second circle mage. Yet shrouded in flames, the young conjurer prepared his counterattack: multiple flame arrows. Moments later, the two spells collided violently, producing a massive explosion of magical energy. When the smoke finally cleared, a vast crater was revealed beneath the twilight sky. Wounded and breathless, the adversary could hardly believe what he saw, while hearing that he had chosen the wrong opponent. Even so, he still thought he could win alone and escape, despite his disadvantage against the knight. The fire mage stared him down and firmly declared that he would not allow him to flee. Faced with such determination, the enemy acknowledged the boy's talent, praising his confidence and mastery of complex spells at such a young age. With eyes burning in rage, he thought the other could never imagine being defeated here and now. Then he shouted the name of the spell, Falling Ice, summoning massive fragments of ice all around him. As the frozen blocks crashed down violently, his rival remained calm, watching with unwavering seriousness. At that instant, a colossal cube of energy appeared, completely blocking the enemy's magic. Stunned, the ice conjurer was left speechless, unable to understand how such a thing was possible. Soon, pillars of earth rose from the ground, smashing against the ice and shattering it into pieces. In disbelief, he realized the young mage had managed to stop his most powerful spell. Then the mage raised his arms, summoning earth spears that encircled the battlefield. His hand glowed brightly, preparing the final strike. Thorn branches tore through the shards of ice suspended in the air. Aghast, the enemy could not accept that a mere second circle mage was wielding third circle spells. Seeing this, he heard a taunt to guess how such a thing was possible. Noticing the four elemental attributes at work, he finally understood he had been deceived from the start. With no strength left, he collapsed to the ground, defeated, staring at the one who had bested him. As the sun set, the victor remained standing, gazing at the fallen body at his feet. He reflected that coming here had been worthwhile, for he had learned something valuable about battling mages. With a faint smile, he looked down with satisfaction after the hard-fought clash. Suddenly, a strange glow caught his attention. A pendant with an unusual gem shone on the neck of a creature. A colossal, menacing orc rose among the corpses, and blood scattered across the battlefield. 2 days before the expedition, the character created an experimental remedy using ingredients from the magic tower, naming it the magic circulator. As he recalled the days he had spent in that place, he hesitated to conduct new tests on humans, but even so, he injected the green liquid. With the application, a loud noise and a piercing scream filled the room. Because of this, he reached the 3rd level, proving the experiment's success. Meanwhile, Asher stood over the motionless body of an enemy, reflecting on how to prove the worth of his work, until something caught his attention. He quickly approached and noticed a wand lying nearby, wondering if it was the same one used by his opponent. He then activated a magical appraisal on the object. The wand reduced casting time and increased the power of ice spells, a very useful combination for his combat style. At that moment, Sir Peric arrived hurriedly, visibly relieved to see his ally safe. Even though the confrontation against the stronger enemy had taken some time, he was satisfied with the outcome and inspected the traces left by the battle. Soon after, Asher asked if all the bandits had been defeated and was told that only the leader remained, still engaged in combat against Enoch. As they prepared to return, the knight asked permission to pose a question. He then inquired what would be done with the belongings of the defeated enemies. Excited, he explained that the leader had allowed them to take any items of interest as long as they weren't essential to the group. Thinking of Baron Pythe, Asher concluded that the wand would be put to good use in his hands. Shortly after, he received praise from another knight, who thanked him for preventing further losses. He replied that it had been a valuable experience. Meanwhile, one of the bound bandits was in shock upon learning that Vilshan had been killed, considering it impossible. Despair consumed him as he imagined being brought before the leader and executed, something he refused to accept. For that reason, he decided he needed to escape. At that moment, Asher and the knight accompanying him merely watched. As soon as the prisoner lunged, he attacked one of the guards with ferocity. Furious, he shouted for them to get out his way. He thought that without Vilshan's magic, he had no means of breaking through enemy defenses, leaving him only one option. Immediately after, he promised to kill the knight, steal his horse, and flee, charging at him. The tension was palpable. He gripped the knife tightly, consumed by desperation. In that same instant, the knight blocked the strike with his sword. The attacker recoiled in shock, never imagining his plan would be thwarted so quickly. He was then hurled into the air, utterly stunned by what had happened. As he fell, he saw his blade fly from his hand, realizing too late that he had dropped it. Moments later, he crashed to the ground and was restrained by 2 soldiers, while the knight scolded him for discarding his weapon and showing no sense of pride. The warrior only sneered, mocking his words. He said that pride was something reserved only for those still alive. Afterward, he apologized to his comrade for showing him such an unpleasant scene. Enoch explained that he was not accustomed to fighting in that way, but regretted not having had the time to be more careful. Asher, for his part, praised his companion's performance. Curious, he asked why he had spared the bandits. In response, the knight said he had heard there were familiar faces among them. He further explained that they might be survivors of a city attack, and that they would be taken to the castle to confirm their identities before their fates were decided. At that moment, a soldier gave the order for everyone to prepare for the return and move the prisoners. He then pulled one of the bound men, who resisted fiercely. Another bandit, also tied, tried to flee in desperation, fearing death, but was stopped by a firm command. As the fugitive struggled, the soldier promised to deal with him. Just then, Asher intervened and asked them to wait, sensing something was wrong. The bandit begged for help, while the 2 of them listened to his desperate cries. Suddenly, a red glow enveloped the soldier's body, who then asked if anyone else could smell blood. While the group stayed alert, something was hurled toward the guard. He instinctively raised his defense. Moments later, a severed head rolled across the ground, leaving a grotesque trail of blood. The scene shocked the group, who wondered what it could be. Some speculated it was an orc, but found it hard to believe. Asher considered the possibility and asked whether it truly was an orc. He reflected that perhaps the previous adventurers had been unable to defeat it. With a chill, he realized he was sensing dozens of presences similar to that creature. Understanding they were not dealing with just one, he quickly concluded that the being must be the leader of the beasts. It resembled something he had faced before, with a mouth shaped into a grin and a colossal body. From its size, he deduced that the creature had evolved. The orcs began to move, launching their assault against the group. Enoch quickly ordered everyone to adopt defensive formations and focus on the goblins first, leaving the main orc for later. He then charged one of the creatures and delivered a direct strike. He felt the impact reverberate through him and reacted in pain. At that moment, the orc prepared to crush him beneath its feet. However, nearby adventurers counterattacked and managed to push the monster back. Even so, Enoch took advantage of the opening and dealt a precise blow with his sword. With a firm motion, he pulled the blade free, causing intense bleeding. Moments later, the orc fell to the ground as the group began to retreat. The creature writhed in pain, blood dripping from its mouth and chest. Then it seized a small goblin in its hands. The soldiers watched in horror as the beast devoured the smaller ally. Moments later, it spat out a blood-covered bone. It then rose again, cloaked in a menacing aura. It was then that Enoch questioned whether the orc had healed itself by devouring one of its own. With a grave look, he concluded that they would not leave this place in peace. Enoch shouted for everyone to prepare for battle as the orc rose menacingly. The creature then hurled its sword in a swift, unexpected strike. Harris suddenly felt the blade pass dangerously close to his face. He managed to block the attack, though he wondered why the enemy had thrown its weapon in such a way. With the impact, however, his own sword shattered into pieces under the brute force of the enemy's strike. Shards of the broken blade scattered around him. Several fragments cut into his face, leaving deep wounds and causing heavy bleeding. Moments later, Harris screamed in pain, his body covered in streaks of blood. Another companion, horrified by the sight, cried out his name in alarm. While Perrick called for him, the monster suddenly appeared at his side. Perrick readied himself to strike, declaring that he would land a blow. But when he attacked, he was shocked to find his sword stuck in the creature's thick muscles. He tried to pull it free with all his strength, but it would not budge. The orc began to close in with its massive hands. Before the creature could finish him, it was struck directly in the face by another attack. At that moment, Asher summoned Perrick closer, stones beginning to levitate around him. Sliding to his side, Perrick confirmed that he was still alive, but admitted there was a new problem. With tears in his eyes, he asked how he was supposed to fight now that he had lost his sword. Asher explained that after devouring the goblin, the orc's regeneration speed and physical resistance had increased dramatically. Perrick recalled how he had put all his strength into trying to cut the creature's arm, admitting he had never heard of an orc so powerful. He even wondered aloud if it might be a legendary entity. But Asher quickly refuted his theory, leaving him even more confused. Surprised, Perrick insisted that such strength could not come from an ordinary orc. Asher explained that this creature possessed regeneration and empowerment abilities through consumption. It could also command its subordinates and even drive them into madness. Other monsters began to appear, reinforcing the threat. The orc's power was so great that it surpassed even training knights, making it completely unlike any of its kind. One of those knights was suddenly hurled aside after being struck by the beast. Even faced with such danger, Asher smiled, saying that if this was all the creature had, it was far too weak to be considered a special entity. Then a hooded figure appeared, conjuring magic, and it was explained that ordinary spells had a fixed limit. Going beyond that limit caused them to collapse. Yet there was one spell without such a limit: geographic manipulation. Asher prepared to cast it, his hands wrapped in magical energy. As he made the gestures, a massive magic circle formed around him. In the center of a whirlwind of dirt and debris, he stood firm, stunning the surrounding soldiers. Two of them panicked as the ground shook, one crying out in fear, asking if other species were nearby, terrified of death. Enoch tried to calm them, urging them to hold their positions, insisting it was only Asher's magic. Yet even he began to question the situation. Soon the landscape split open into a massive abyss filled with countless creatures, while Enoch's group stood upon a raised platform. Goblins tumbled into the newly formed pit. The larger creatures slammed into the ground, bloodied and roaring in pain. The main orc now lay wounded at the bottom of the abyss, groaning in fury. Meanwhile, Asher began chanting a powerful fire spell, raising one hand amid searing flames. Moments later, a colossal column of fire descended from the heavens. The third layer spell, Flame Ball. Perrick cheered as he watched the enemies burn, finding it deeply satisfying, only to be scolded to keep his composure. Asher observed carefully, explaining that while geographic manipulation had no limit to its expansion, few used it due to its extreme mana cost compared to its destructive output. He sighed in disappointment, lamenting that the result had fallen short of his expectations, despite having enough mana to create a superior effect. Suddenly, a roar shook the battlefield, startling Asher and the group. The main orc, still alive and cloaked in red energy, rose from the flames surrounded by goblins. Perrick asked Asher what they should do now that the orc refused to die by fire. Deep in thought, Asher began casting another spell, Wave. The blue aura concentrated in his hands, and both the orc and the goblins were engulfed by a massive surge of water. Perrick shouted Asher's name as the mage lifted his staff with a determined gaze. Asher focused his power, conjuring multi-ice arrows and winter gale. He floated within a circle of frost, declaring that he would freeze the orc to death. With bitter cold arrows, countless ice projectiles pierced the main orc. Soon after, the goblins around it were also frozen solid. But despite the freezing attacks, the orcs still charged furiously toward Asher, who maintained his circle of ice. Asher noted that whether the creature regenerated or ignored pain, it would not move once its body froze. He darted around the orc as it lunged forward with a wicked grin, eyes and fangs gleaming. Asher held a pulsating blue orb of light in his hands. He unleashed a massive frozen orb directly into the orc, striking it head-on. The beast was completely encased in ice. Asher declared that the victory was complete. The scene shifted to the majestic and beautiful magic city of Virent. Two young men spoke calmly on a balcony, one asking the other if he had heard the news. The other confirmed. One remarked about the sealed magic tower and the supposed explosion of its energy source, while the other questioned whether such news could be trusted. The disappearance of mages and the tower's inactivity suggested damage far too great for a mere energy accident, something one of them admitted he had not felt in a long time. The mustached man listened as people speculated about divine punishment or a planned disaster, pleased that their theory had been proven, while wondering about messages from the tower. Someone had orchestrated the sealing of the Bomer magic tower. The mustached man whispered that the tower would never seal itself, suspecting it had been attacked because of its secret experiments. Suddenly, he spilled his coffee, visibly shaken after being grabbed. A hooded figure clutched him, demanding that he repeat what he had just said. Confused, he asked what was happening. The woman with red hair, once hooded, revealed herself and asked firmly what happened. With a serious look, she pressed him again. What happened to the Bomer magic tower? Everyone cheered joyfully for the safe return of the subjugation squad. After the mission's conclusion, the host lord offered a celebratory banquet in his territory. While praising everyone's accomplishments, a noble remarked that he could not see Asher anywhere. Soon after, he spotted him on the other side of the hall, smiling. At that moment, the mage approached and asked if perhaps he had arrived too late. The host replied that he had arrived at the perfect time, offering him a glass of wine. After thanking him, the newcomer expressed surprise at seeing common soldiers at the banquet. Yet the noble insisted that rank and status did not matter that evening. With that, the topic shifted. The host asked whether the bandits had not been too strong, which was quickly confirmed. Reflecting on it, the mage commented that with such skill, the criminals could have chosen different paths. The other agreed, noting that his assistant's investigation might shed further light on the matter. Soon after, the subordinate revealed that the enemies were criminals and former gold rank adventurers. After one of them killed a companion, the group folded and eventually formed a bandit gang. Upon reading the report, Asher understood why the bounty had been so high. Their threat level justified it. Realizing the reason behind Pythi's satisfaction, he concluded that the losses would have been severe without his intervention. Suddenly, he noticed the host's peculiar gaze and asked why he was being stared at in that way. The noble explained that Asher had not only defeated the bandits but also the demi-humans, which made him proud. He quickly recomposed himself, blaming the wine for his sudden enthusiasm. He then announced that thanks to the mage, it had been possible to rescue the villagers and honor the victims. With that, he proposed a toast to the hero who had saved his land. Everyone in the hall raised their glasses and mugs in a lively cheer to the one responsible for victory. The banquet carried an atmosphere far removed from that of the magic tower. Here, Everyone celebrated in unity. Unlike the cold and pretentious environment of the tower, this place was genuinely welcoming. For that reason, the warmth of the people deeply moved Verdun. For the first time since fleeing, he was pulled into the celebration by a cheerful companion. Because of this, he managed to smile sincerely amid the collective joy. Meanwhile, none yet realized the impending chaos caused by the collapse of the magic tower. Lady Revelin, however, doubted the rumors as she observed that the structures still seemed intact. When asked, she confirmed she had returned from Vorent, relieved by what she saw. She then inquired about Verdun's whereabouts, leaving her interlocutor visibly hesitant. He merely pointed toward the distant crowd, indicating where the young man stood. As she approached, the lady came upon a board listing the names of the missing. With a somber face, she stared at the list, unable to believe what she saw. Looking at the pictures of so many mages, she thought it could not be true. Reading further, she insisted to herself that it was all a great mistake, that her eyes fixed on the portrait of one particular person. It was Verdun's report declaring him missing in the energy chamber. At that instant, she remembered the moment he had been congratulated for the chance to study abroad. Then she recalled the serious conversation they had had immediately afterward. On that day, Verdun had told her that in the end he had decided to remain in the tower. Revelin realized that had been the last time she saw him. The pain of loss consumed her, making her cover her face in despair. Soon despair turned into fury, for she refused to accept their separation. As she thought of how dear a friend he had been, her magical energy exploded outward. Suddenly, a firm voice said it was enough as a hand touched her head. Looking up, she saw Sir Valdek and called his name through her tears. Still shaken, she asked what had truly happened at the magic tower. The knight explained that the energy source had gone berserk during the festival and wiped out all the station mages. In addition, years of research had been erased and the vault's magic circle had been damaged. As a result, all stored contents, including books and artifacts, were lost in incalculable destruction. Valdek then revealed that the most regrettable loss, however, had been something else. Experimental Subject 77, whose mind might have restored the erased records. Even so, he affirmed that at least they could still take vengeance, for they had found a lead on the culprit. Revelin immediately asked what he meant, and the knight explained that someone had disappeared before the incident. Using the tower's resources to track that person, he showed her what he had found. Upon receiving the object, she instantly recognized it as the symbol of the Dark Hour. She was confused, for it belonged to a group seeking to dominate the world through magic. Valdek admitted he did not know how they had infiltrated, but assured her they were involved in the disaster. To avenge those who had died, he announced the formation of an extermination squad and offered her a place among them. In response, she clenched her fist tightly, glowing with intense energy. Seeing her determined expression, he understood her decision was already made. A few days later, at the Adventurers Guild in Pegasus territory, a man thanked Asher for waiting. The guildmaster then apologized to Sir Asher for the recent incident. He explained that they had sent gold-rank adventurers, but the outcome had been disastrous. To Asher, it seemed nothing more than coincidence. Relieved at his understanding, the guildmaster thanked him and handed him the reward certificate. Reading the document, Asher saw that the total of 24 million would be reduced to 12 million after taxes. The man explained that the 50% tax for non-affiliates was imperial law and could not be avoided. However, he revealed there was a legal way around it. Asher quickly deduced that the suggestion was to become an adventurer. The master confirmed enthusiastically, explaining that he could start directly at silver rank due to his special case. While encouraged to sign the registration, Asher declined, reflecting that money was not the most important thing. With a faint smile, he simply took the certificate, for his true priority was to grow strong enough for his vengeance. Even after living for 7 years as a test subject in the Magic Tower, his essence remained that of a mage. As a researcher of mysteries, he now found himself in the Adventurers Guild warehouse within Pegasus territory. There he revealed that he had brought the body of the variant he had defeated. Also, he could conduct a complete study of the creature. While analyzing the corpse, he was surprised to discover that the guild possessed an artifact capable of preserving whatever it covered. Even so, the stench was unbearable, for the condition of the cadaver was far from ideal. Inspecting the orc, he noted that red pupils and reddish skin were not unusual, but the creature's torn mouth and large, imposing physique set it apart from others of its kind. From this, he concluded that these traits indicated a mutation, not an evolution into a superior species. It's something troubled him as the analysis still felt incomplete. After all, mutation alone could not explain the creature's regeneration or its monstrous strength. Suddenly, his attention was drawn to a detail he had overlooked. He soon noticed that the monster bore a scar. He reflected that the orc's regenerative power, capable of restoring even charred flesh, had not healed this wound. Therefore, the creature must have acquired its regenerative abilities after receiving that scar. He concluded that the mark was the result of an incision made to grant powers to a demi-human. Since the only known method of achieving this was through force evolution, the deduction deeply unsettled him. Thus, he deduced that someone had artificially created the variant, a worst-case scenario. Days later, as they bid farewell, Conrad insisted that there was no need to escort him so far, but the mage replied that saving his life was the least he could do. Even so, Asher felt he had already received much in return, pointing to the magical equipment he had been given. Conrad countered that such gear was nothing more than the rightful reward he deserved. With a sincere smile, Asher thanked him. The traveler then departed while Conrad wished for his good health. Just afterward, Conrad shouted that Asher should use his name at any guild branch, promising he would not regret it. After their farewell, the mage cast a flight spell and soared quickly across the forest. Soon he arrived at a village on the border between Pega's territory and the barony of Martis. Canceling the spell, he landed discreetly on a village street. Consulting a map, he confirmed that this was the only settlement between the city and the barony. He bought a piece of fruit and calculated that resting here for one night would suit his schedule. However, upon tasting it, he frowned, realizing something was off. Hearing a nearby conversation, he sensed an opportunity to gather information and decided to listen more carefully. Using the spell Whisper of the Wind, he discovered that the villagers' greatest concern was goblins. One man complained that the monsters had stolen their livestock, forcing them to pay dearly for adventurers. Another tried to calm him down, while Asher silently wondered why goblins would be in this region. After all, they were pests that began with petty theft, but in groups, could attack entire villages. Knowing that summoning adventurers was the usual solution, he tossed the rest of the fruit aside with disdain. Soon, the conversation shifted to a rumor about a monster in the forest, sparking his interest further. Even though the village chief had ordered silence, one man prepared to tell the tale. He began by recounting how, just days earlier, a hunter had entered the forest to check his traps as usual. Then he heard the scream of a boar and turned to see what was happening. There he found a goblin with a torn mouth larger than an orc, ferociously devouring the animal. As the frightened villagers debated, the mage quietly dispelled his spell with a snap of his fingers. Reflecting on the unexpected information, he thought about the torn-mouthed goblin. With a faint smile, he concluded that it could hardly be mere coincidence. Thus, he turned his gaze toward the mountains, his next destination now decided. At that moment, a magical spear flew at high speed through the forest. It pierced directly into the eye of a goblin scout. The creature's body collapsed heavily to the ground, while two adventurers watched from the bushes. With the strike, Myrna boasted of her improvement to her companion Toke, but he scolded her for bragging over such an easy target, reminding her they were still on a mission. Soon after, the group's leader, Iris, asked their scout Mild if he had found any sign of goblins. He pointed to a nearby cave, indicating it seemed to be the monster's den. Looking closer, they noticed the bone totems that marked the presence of hobgoblins, a superior species. With that, Iris ordered the totems and warnings destroyed before entry, earning her group's approval. She then cast a spell to enhance her companion's vision. Myrna, astonished, realized she could now see perfectly in the dark. Iris confirmed that this way they would not need torches, earning praise for her reliability as a leader. After preparing, the adventurers advanced toward the cave entrance. But suddenly, the leader halted, prompting Myrna to ask in confusion what was wrong. Though she said it was nothing, Iris felt a faint presence of mana and remained on guard. In the distance, the forest stayed silent, hiding the presence of someone unseen. Meanwhile, a rustle in the bushes revealed that they had been watched all along. Inside a dark cave, a faint light marked the path deeper within. Ahead, a group of goblins was performing a ritual around a campfire. Suddenly, one of them failed to notice a glimmer emerging from the darkness of the tunnel. The next instant, an arrow pierced straight through its head, shocking the creature beside it. With that, the adventurers charged quickly into battle. At that moment, the two warriors leaped forward, cutting down goblins with their swords. Meanwhile, the archer remarked that everything seemed to be going well, but the mage warned her not to let her guard down. After the skirmish, the group gathered to study the shadowed passage ahead. It was then that Myrna volunteered to scout the path, while Iris urged her to be careful and to send a signal. As Myrna advanced, she found a corridor littered with goblin corpses. Her expression suddenly hardened. The swordsman asked what was wrong, and she answered that she had just heard something strange. From the shadows, a silhouette slowly revealed itself. Moments later, a massive creature rose from the ground. Startled, the entire group turned to face the figure emerging before them. In that instant, they realized it was a giant mutant goblin, one not mentioned in the mission. Weapon in hand, Iris announced that she would focus on bringing it down and explain the plan. She instructed Myrna to shoot the goblin's right eye, while Loke and Mild would buy time until she could finish it off. Following the strategy, the archer leaped from a rock, bow drawn, aiming with precision. Her arrows struck directly into the monster's eye. As the creature reeled in pain, Loke shouted for Mild to raise his shield at once. The two warriors then charged together, their weapons glowing with energy. But as Loke leaped to strike, he realized his attack had little effect. Mid-swing, he noticed something was wrong. The goblin's massive hand closed in, trying to seize him. At that moment, Iris prepared a mana explosion spell. She unleashed multiple spheres of energy that slammed into the goblin's body. The impact made the beast stagger and roar. With terrifying strength, it hurled another goblin directly at them. Stunned, Loke shouted that the creature had just thrown one of its own. Immediately, Myrna cried out for Iris to duck as the body hurtled toward her. From the shadows, Asher intervened, using an ability to deflect the projectile midair. A surge of energy struck the goblin in flight, shifting its trajectory. The corpse crashed violently into the stone wall just beside the mage. Collapsed on the ground, Iris stared at the dark stain on the wall. At the same time, another arrow flew at high speed, this one striking precisely into the giant goblin's remaining eye. The impact drove the monster to the ground, finally defeated. The group rushed to check on Iris, who assured them she was fine. Still confused, she noted aloud that the goblin's flight path had suddenly changed, saving her from a direct hit. Finally, Loke suggested they all return to the village for their reward, since the mission was now complete. Hidden once more, Asher watched the group depart and muttered that it was fortunate nothing worse had occurred. Near the goblin's corpse, he revealed that he had followed the group invisibly to observe one of the specimens. He concluded that although all the other variants he had encountered bore torn smiles, this goblin was different. Unlike the others, this one had been nothing more than a failed experiment. As the group regrouped, Iris instructed everyone to sweep the area for any remaining monsters. Asher realized then that the mage was highly sensitive to mana, and that it had not been mere coincidence that she had sensed his presence earlier. He sighed in frustration at having collected no useful information from the creature. Suddenly, a voice startled him. A man emerged from the depths of the cave, remarking that someone had arrived during his absence. Immediately, Iris demanded his identity and warned him not to approach. The newcomer introduced himself as the caretaker of the place they had just destroyed. He explained that the creature had revealed their location by building a totem, as the brain manipulation had failed to suppress its instincts. He then asked whether the group had noticed any unusual behavior in the goblin. When they stayed silent, he deduced there had been nothing special about it and worried about the professor's reaction. Deciding he needed to correct the mistake, he declared that everyone present would have to die. Hearing the threat, the adventurers immediately took their battle stances. Iris asked if he planned to fight alone, and the man confirmed, saying it was the only way to ensure their silence. As a last attempt, she offered a promise of secrecy to avoid conflict. But he dismissed the proposal, saying he had no intention of letting them leave alive. With a sinister smile, he confessed that what he truly wanted was simply to hear them scream. As he advanced toward the group, he taunted them, asking who would like to die first. Suddenly, a new voice declared that the only one to die would be him. The man laughed at what he considered empty bravado. At once, however, he realized the voice had come from behind him. Turning quickly, he tried to identify the speaker. Asher appeared, stepping out from the shadows, questioning the man's threats of screams and death. The man dropped to a defensive crouch as the intruder told him he was the one pretending to be strong. With his body enveloped in energy, spell forming in his hands, Asher asked coldly, "Do you agree?" Thus, Asher advanced toward the man, declaring that he had not intended to intervene. Even so, his interference had become necessary to prevent the group behind him from being annihilated. In that moment, he recalled how the man had referred to the goblin as a test subject. The mention of a figure called the Professor also caught his attention. With that certainty, the caretaker stared at him seriously and demanded to know who he was. Asher, however, refused to answer as he began preparing a large magic circle. The caretaker claimed that it did not matter, even if his identity was never revealed. He lunged forward, cloaked in an aura, vowing that Asher's death at his hands was inevitable. In response, the mage conjured a spell of multiple fire arrows. The caretaker, however, sliced through each flaming projectile with bursts of energy. At that moment, the man's blade clashed directly against Asher's magical shield. The barrier shattered, releasing a wave of mana that hurled the enemy backward. Landing, the caretaker realized his speed came from legs reinforced with energy. At the same time, Asher noted the opponent's superior speed and decided he would need to alter his combat strategy. The caretaker praised Asher's rapid casting and declared that he too would increase his speed. With a challenge, he leaped from a wall, diving straight for the mage. Asher responded with a dual cast, combining Winter Gale and Ice magic. The ability to wield both ice and wind simultaneously surprised his opponent. A storm of ice surged toward the caretaker. Even acknowledging the skill behind the attack, the man deftly evaded each projectile. He vaulted over Asher, taunting that the assault was pointless if it missed its target. The mage, however, remained still, head lowered. At the last instant, the caretaker's strike of energy sliced mere inches above his head. Asher leaned back sharply, dodging the blow completely. The evasion shocked both the caretaker and Iris, who could not comprehend how a mage reacted with such speed. Immediately after, Asher activated an ignition spell, engulfing himself in flames. A massive explosion erupted, consuming the area where the caretaker stood. Moments later, rain began to pour down upon the battlefield. Amid the storm, the enemy realized he had been lured into a counterattack. He vowed such a trick would not work again. Asher then asked if that meant traps would no longer affect him, declaring that from this moment forward, he would fight as a true mage. The ground trembled, rising suddenly, making Iris cry out as the earth surged beneath them. The pillar of stone continued to ascend, leaving the group bewildered. When it finally stopped, Iris recognized the spell as terrain manipulation and was astonished it was being used in combat. She realized that with such rapid casting and large-scale magic, His mana reserves had to be immense. She concluded she had never seen a combat style like his before. The caretaker mocked Asher for fleeing into the air after promising to fight like a mage. But then he realized his opponent had not only lifted himself but had also raised the adventurers with him. He noticed too late that the earlier flames had melted the ice shards, creating a pool of water at his feet. At that moment, Asher extended his hand toward it. Confused, the caretaker looked upward. Meanwhile, Iris watched the scene closely. She immediately recognized the attack: lightning magic. Asher activated a third-tier lightning spell, a feat so difficult that only a handful of academy professors could wield it. The energy was so intense that he struggled with all of his might to control it. Stunned, the caretaker demanded to know Asher's identity, shocked that he could use fire, ice, wind, and even lightning. Iris then realized that he was performing a triple cast, fusing multiple elements at once. The combined strike unleashed an explosion, raising a massive curtain of dust and debris. Slowly, the smoke began to dissipate. When the haze cleared, the mage descended lightly to the ground. He demanded answers from the caretaker about an orc he had encountered. Then he asked if all such creatures were connected to the professor. Wounded and collapsed, the man understood that Asher had been responsible for the fate of the orc. With a twisted smile, he asked if the young mage had come from the Ark. The mention of the Ark left Asher visibly confused. The caretaker dismissed the need for him to know, but Asher pressed for the professor's location, revealing his interest in the experiments. Even recognizing the danger, the man began to disclose the professor's whereabouts. But with a sudden twist, he chose to die alongside Asher and spat something from his mouth. At the last instant, Asher raised a magical shield to protect himself. He immediately understood the man's intent and prepared a final annihilation spell. With regret, he lamented that his efforts to gather clues about the jesters had been in vain. Still, he resolved to focus on what needed to be done. He walked toward the adventurers group. With a dark silhouette and glowing eyes, he stood before them to announce his decision. He declared coldly that from now on, they would all have to follow his command. Back in the village, Iris informed Asher that she had followed his orders and received extra compensation from the chief. She explained that the payment was 1.2 million ALK in exchange for keeping silent about the mutant goblin. Once the agreement was confirmed, Asher handed her a pouch of coins, asking that she accept it. Surprised, she hesitated, but he clarified that it was the commission for the mission. Afterward, he requested that the group accompany him to the city of Martis. During the journey, Iris took the opportunity to question him about elemental magic theory, and soon the group arrived at their destination. Upon entering the city, Asher carefully observed the streets while searching for a bank. While the others headed to the guild to submit their reports, Iris was tasked with guiding him. Since he expressed a desire to handle his reward and open an account, she suggested they first visit the city hall. Confidently, she took the lead, claiming she knew Martis very well. From a distance, the rest of the group remarked on how calm their leader seemed even after what happened in the cave. Their first destination was Martis City Hall, the authority responsible for handling rewards. At the entrance, a guard attempted to stop Asher for not having verifiable identification. The situation was resolved when he presented the guarantee issued by Baron Pathy. Inside the building, an official welcomed him enthusiastically, declaring that he had already heard of his deeds. The gratitude stemmed from the fact that his own family lived in the Baron's territory, which Asher had protected from bandits. Unexpectedly, the man also issued him a new identification document. Thanks to this, Asher was able to open a bank account without difficulty. Though he still had his old account in Viant, he knew using it could draw the attention of the master of the tower. With this in mind, he chose to remain cautious. Next, he visited a blacksmith, requesting that his weapon be reforged into a staff. The smith estimated 3 days to complete the work and provided him with a temporary staff in the meantime. As they walked, Iris asked why he preferred that kind of weapon. He simply replied that he had grown accustomed to using brooms. Soon after, they arrived at the public library of Martis. Curious, Iris asked if he was seeking enchantment books but warned that they might not be suited to his level. He replied that the basics would suffice. Then she asked how many he intended to take. To her surprise, Asher answered all of them. In the grand reading hall, the librarian attempted to intervene upon noticing the enormous stack of books. Asher requested that the cost be debited from his account and that the volumes be delivered to his hotel. Once confirmed, the librarian celebrated it as the greatest sale in the library's history. By the end of the day, Iris rested exhausted over a desk while Asher remained immersed in a book. Catching her breath, she asked if she had now taken him everywhere he wanted to go. He replied that it was enough for the day, surprising her with such a simple answer. Moments later, Iris realized she had never asked his name and decided to do so. From behind the book, he introduced himself as Asher, but told her she could call him whatever she liked. She accepted and asked that they speak more casually from then on. Taking the chance, Iris finally inquired about the reason for his presence in the cave. The question left him thoughtful, without an immediate answer. After reflecting, he gave a vague excuse, saying he had been chasing that man. Hearing this, she seemed to understand. She then remembered his questions about the professor inside the cave and began to piece things together. Asher remarked that, although he had not gained much, the day had already been long enough and she should rest. Still, Iris offered to accompany him since he was new to the city, but he declined. On the street, she wished him good night, saying she would see him the next day. As she walked away, she quietly celebrated the end of a long day of work. Collapsing onto a bench, she muttered that he truly was a strange man. Reflecting, she acknowledged his magical mastery, capable of manipulating all elemental attributes with an immeasurable mana reserve. He also commanded theories superior to many professors and even possessed talent as a teacher. His appearance, she noted, suggested he must be quite popular. And yet, whenever she spoke with him, his demeanor was stiff, almost like a scarecrow. Suddenly, she held her face in confusion as his image continued to surface in her mind. At last, she concluded that he was the most skilled mage she had ever met. A rare talent. Determined, she resolved that tomorrow she would ask him even more questions about elemental magic. At that moment, a distant explosion caught her attention. She turned sharply toward the sound. To her horror, she realized the Lorix Hotel was engulfed in flames. Immediately, she remembered that it was the place where Asher was staying. Amid the blaze, a human silhouette floated in the air. Iris stared at the scene, barely able to believe her eyes. The figure revealed itself as Asher, his eyes glowing with an intense, unearthly light. In a laboratory, the hooded figure informed a bespectacled man that Surgeon was dead. The man asked who had killed him, and the hooded figure replied that he had found traces of offensive magic. Upon hearing the conclusion that someone else had murdered Surgeon, the man hurled a vial into the hooded figure's face. It warned him not to play dumb. With a sharp glare, he repeated his question about who had killed Surgeon. The hooded one explained that they had not yet confirmed the culprit. The man lamented Surgeon's death before asking about the test subject. The subordinate confirmed that all traces of both Surgeon and the test subject had been completely erased. At this, the professor berated him for failing to deal with Surgeon's killer as well. In that moment, he connected the deaths of the goblin and Surgeon to the silence of the two test subjects from Pythi's barony. With the experiment nearly complete, he wondered if the group known as the Ark had already discovered them. He then ordered the hooded figure not to return until he had killed the one responsible. The messenger departed, determined to find the culprit at any cost. Meanwhile, at the hotel, Asher was practicing basic enchantment magic when a voice greeted him. While he continued training, the voice warned him to fall asleep quickly, because his last moment would be upon lying down. Suddenly, the hooded man hidden beneath the bed grew suspicious at the silence in the room. When he noticed the spell Bone of Earth forming, he was shocked that he had been discovered. Asher struck directly with his staff, forcing the intruder to leap backward in surprise. Immediately afterward, the enemy floated into the air, cloaked in a blazing aura of fire. Among the crowd, the assassin watched the use of explosive magic in a confined space. From this, he concluded that Asher was a third-tier mage and decided to retreat for the time being. To cover his escape, he shouted about a terrorist attack, spreading panic among the people. Asher quickly ordered everyone to flee and report the incident to the guards at once. Amid the chaos, he reflected on how the assassin had managed to evade his magical detection. He realized that the enemy had made a mistake in rushing. By erasing his presence completely, he had become even more visible to Asher, like a dark hole on a blank page. An attack then struck him directly. As the assassin fled, he wondered how he had been sensed and what exactly the Ark had sent against him. Stunned by his opponent's lack of hesitation. Unfazed, Asher prepared a magic arrow spell. The enemy dodged the projectiles while sprinting through an alley. Leaping back among the rubble, he tried to shield himself from the magical barrage. From above, Asher observed and asked if he had entered the building just to avoid his attack. He then landed in front of it to continue the chase. Inside, he realized the assassin had chosen a building occupied by vagrants. At that moment, one of the men confronted him about the commotion, but Asher only asked where the assassin had gone. The man merely stared back with an ironic smile, commenting on his impatience. Then he made it clear that any information would come at a price. With a sigh, Asher noticed there were no obvious escape routes inside. The moment he concluded the assassin was still nearby, a dagger grazed his face. The enemy had used the man as a shield, stabbing him in an attempt to hit Asher. Hidden behind the body, the assassin watched carefully for Asher's reaction. Asher glared at him, recognizing the cowardice of the move. Without hesitation, he released a shockwave that hurled the enemy against the back wall. Dazed from the impact, the assassin quickly formed a plan to lure Asher into spending energy on a magical barrier and then escape during the opening with a smoke bomb. Armed, he leaped forward for a final strike. But to his shock, Asher did not raise a barrier. Instead, he recognized the spell Bone of Earth forming. To his surprise, the mana was concentrated at the tip of the staff, not in defense. In that instant, he understood that his opponent also mastered close-quarters combat. The blow landed squarely, forcing him back. Then the spell lifted him into the air, immobilizing him. Desperate, the assassin used his last resort, a smoke bomb. The explosion filled the room with thick, black haze. To disperse the dark veil, Asher conjured a whirlwind. The smoke cleared rapidly, revealing a trail of blood on the floor. Suspicious, he wondered if the enemy had truly escaped. Suddenly, a firm voice interrupted, ordering him not to move. Surrounded by guards, he was informed that he was under arrest for arson and axe. though the city of Martis slept, the report on the incident was being carefully summarized. Then Mayor Henry Dacre questioned whether Asher was truly responsible for the terrorist act. At once, an officer clarified that Asher seemed instead to be the victim of an assassination attempt that had led to the confrontation. With that, Guildmaster Oscar explained that the case appeared to be linked to another incident, which was why he was personally supervising the investigation. Thus, the mayor showed concern for the newcomer and asked about the damages caused. In response, the officer reported that only the top floor of the inn had been destroyed and that a wanted criminal had died, though the assassin remained at large. He also mentioned the testimony of a female adventurer who had encountered a mutant goblin and an armed attacker in a cave. However, Oscar revealed that when they visited the site, they had found no trace of bodies or goblins. The place was completely empty, with no sign of monsters or creatures. Therefore, the mayor concluded that an organized group was targeting adventurers and expressed concern about the possibility of further incidents. The guildmaster confirmed this suspicion and explained that he had tried to assign a bodyguard to the young man, but had encountered a problem. He revealed that a rumor had spread through the city, causing adventurers and soldiers alike to refuse to protect him. Faced with the situation, the mayor decided he would speak with his own knights about the matter. The next day, at City Hall's reception, Asher waited with his new staff, which had been completed quickly. Just as he thought about beginning the pursuit, a voice announced its entrance into the room. Soon, a knight introduced himself as Jason, the vice-captain of the Knights of Martis, and informed him that he would serve as his bodyguard. He then asked if there were any questions, while the young mage observed him in silence. At that moment, Asher realized the suspicions about him had been lifted, but he noticed how young the knight was. Because of this, he asked if he could go out, but Jason imposed the condition that he accompany him at all times. Though reluctant, Asher agreed to leave, leaving the knight confused about the destination. After walking for half a day, the sun began to set. Exhausted, Jason finally asked where exactly they were going. The mage recalled the condition, and while the knight complained about the hours of walking, he announced that they had arrived. Before them stood a large building, and he revealed that this was the place he intended to visit. Still confused, Jason asked why they had walked all day just to arrive there. Without answering, Asher unleashed a massive fire explosion against the building. While the knight watched in shock, he explained that he was there to find someone. With a serious look, he revealed that he was searching for the assassin who had tried to kill him the day before. When Jason asked, Asher confirmed that the enemy was indeed in that place. Finally, he explained that he had briefly touched the assassin's body to cast a tracking spell. He explained that the spell, Trace, linked the target's mana flow directly to his own. Since the trace had not been dispelled, it meant the assassin still hadn't noticed it. As Jason remarked on the power of such magic, he suddenly noticed something unusual on the ground. The explosion had revealed the entrance to a hidden underground passage. With his magic, the young mage confirmed that the target's trail led directly into the passage. He asked Jason if he knew the tunnel, and the knight shook his head, explaining that the entrance to that zone was not supposed to be there. Jason realized the gravity of the situation. An unmapped tunnel leading out of the city was a huge problem. It represented a dangerous breach in Martis' security. With his sword in hand, the vice-captain declared they needed to seal the place immediately. But the mage interrupted, saying the priority was to pursue the assassin above all else. Even so, Jason suggested calling reinforcements, but Asher refused, explaining they would lose the target if they did. He then leaped into the passage, insisting that immediate pursuit was the only right choice. Jason glared at the dark tunnel, frustrated with his companion's attitude. With a shout, he jumped in as well, grumbling about how irritating all mages were. Meanwhile, the assassin was walking through the long, dark underground corridor. He regretted wasting so much time at the site. After escaping, he had needed to heal his wounds, but the delay made him fear the professor might kill him. Still, he dismissed the idea of fleeing, knowing he could never escape the fangs of gluttony. With no other option, he entered a room, hoping the professor would show some mercy. The figure greeted him with sarcasm, commenting on his famous face in Martis. Then he scolded him for creating such a spectacle that had alerted both the mayor and the guild to their presence. He demanded a clear and concise explanation of what had happened. The assassin reported that after setting up an ambush, he had been detected and struck by a large-scale spell. He explained that even after using a smoke bomb to escape, the mage had pursued him relentlessly. He then suggested that his escape had only been possible because of the arrival of the knights, but the professor doubted the excuse. Suddenly, the leader seemed to realize what had truly happened. Urgently, he ordered the assassin to remove his armor and burn it at once. As soon as the armor was thrown into the fire, a tracking magic circle revealed itself upon it. The criminal understood then that a spell had been cast on him during the fight. With a panicked face, the professor shouted that they had been found. Wasting no time, he ordered the destruction of all traces while he carried the specimen, and the assassin complied. At that very moment, a massive fire explosion burst through the tunnel entrance. Amidst the flames, the fugitive realized the trace reaction had vanished, finally understanding what had happened. Moments later, the mage and the the knight entered the room, and the enemy sneered that it was a pity for them. With his staff in hand and Jason at his side, the young mage declared that it was already too late. With the repeated words that it was already too late, the two groups faced each other in a tense standoff inside the room. With a sharp gaze, the young mage began to analyze his opponents to grasp the situation. By their combat stance, he quickly recognized the assassin and concluded that the man behind him was the professor. In that instant, the shadowy figure became associated with monstrous creatures and cruel experiments. Then the professor asked him if he was the mad mage, remarking that the Ark had sent someone strange. At the mention of the group Ark, the young man decided he would subdue them first, then extract information afterward. He immediately cast an earth spear, but the assassin moved to shield his master. However, the professor scolded him for ruining everything, and the subordinate only apologized. With no other choice, the man ordered his follower to take responsibility and buy time while he escaped. But the mage swore he wasn't going anywhere and fired a magic arrow to stop him. In a swift move, the assassin leaped in front and blocked the spell. With his weapon in hand, he declared that his orders were to stall for time. Realizing that weak spells wouldn't work but stronger ones risked losing valuable information, the mage hesitated. At that moment, Jason charged forward and blocked the enemy's strike with his sword. With the foe occupied, the knight shouted for him to go on, promising he would catch up soon. In response, the mage surged forward, wrapped in energy, to Jason's surprise. He raced through the tunnel at incredible speed, leaving only a magical trail behind. Reaching the end of the passage, he stopped to search for any trace of the professor. Suddenly, a sharp stench in the air caught his attention. He recognized the odor of corpses and saw the figure waiting for him at the end of a long walkway. The professor greeted him, surprised at his speed, yet pleased to showcase his work. With a gesture, he revealed dozens of creatures locked in dark cages behind him, asking what he thought of his creations. The young man immediately identified them as jesters and confirmed that the man was their creator. The professor explained that these were failures, beings that had not fully accepted his ideals. Then he grabbed a remote control, assuring that they would be more than enough to stop an intruder. Pressing the button, he released all the creatures to attack the mage at once. As the monsters closed in, Asher prepared a wide area strike, unwilling to waste time. He focused, weaving together a dual cast of wave and thunder. The combination unleashed a massive surge of lightning that swept across the hall, striking every creature. The professor was caught off guard by the overwhelming energy. The devastating spell hurled him violently backward. Fallen to the ground and still shaken by the magic, he called Asher a lunatic. He then realized the information about him being only a third-level mage was completely wrong. To control magic of that scale, Asher had to be at least 4th level. Still sprawled on the floor, the man lamented that his decades of research would be wasted if it ended there. In desperation, he crawled to a large red button and slammed it. At once, a containment capsule rose from the ground, revealing a humanoid figure inside. Soon after, he declared it was time to awaken his masterpiece, as the creature within began to stir. Suddenly, the young mage appeared behind him and asked where he thought he was going. But the professor demanded to know how he had gotten past the creatures, only to receive the obvious reply. With a serious look, Asher simply stated that he had burned everything. From that answer, the man knew no ordinary mage could have done such a thing and confirmed his suspicion. With the opponent's reflection gleaming in his glasses, he declared with certainty that Asher was indeed a 4th-level mage. He then pointed to the creature in the capsule and asked what the boy saw at his side. Smiling, he described it as his masterpiece, his very own daughter. As he pressed the button, he revealed that this being was Gluttony, the embodiment of his group's ideology. With conviction, he declared that this child represented the future of humanity. Without hesitation, the mage charged to strike before he could finish, but he realized he was a second too late. The button had already been pressed. From the capsule, the creature emerged, fully transformed, embodying the twisted future of consumption and evolution. As it steadied itself on the floor, the young man finally understood what the professor was attempting. Still on the ground, the man rejoiced, claiming that the mad mage's mana would now serve as nourishment for his creation. With a sinister smile, the creature fixed its glowing, ravenous eyes on him. Then, with a mouthful of teeth, it declared it was hungry. The mage was startled, it spoke. Before he could react, it shouted again that it was hungry, releasing a surge of energy. Fixing its gaze on him, it said he looked delicious and that it would devour him. At once, Asher noticed the creature had enhanced its body with energy, wielding skills that would normally take years to acquire. He watched as the artificial creation used those powers to lunge at him. It attacked with a flurry of rapid strikes, aiming at his blind spots and forcing him into defense. While fending it off, the mage admitted that as a researcher's creation, it was fascinating, but the battle had to end. With a roar, the monster slammed into his energy shield with all its might. Immediately, the young man retaliated with a staff strike that landed squarely on its face. The force of the blow flung the creature violently backward, shattering the ground as it crashed down. Finally, standing before the fallen foe, the mage declared firmly that she was no match for him. To survive for 7 years as a test subject in the magic tower of Bohern, the young man had to constantly suppress his explosive rage. Thus, back in his room after each experiment, he used those emotions as fuel to complete his theory. Now the creature lay on the ground, The more his emotions were stirred by battle, the sharper his expression became. Soon, his mind cleared and a cold rationality took control of his actions. He nicknamed the professor's masterpiece Mortal, whose physical abilities were comparable to Pythi's Jester. Its regenerative capacity also proved to be equally impressive. However, the creature displayed elasticity, flexibility, and speed that were abnormally superior. Even so, the mage realized that its advantages ended there. When he struck, the creature leaped upward swiftly. Suddenly, an earth spear burst from the ground, piercing it directly. The young man revealed that his previous attack had merely been a feint. Next, he prepared multiple magic arrows for his next strike. The creature, however, lacked the technique to discern feints and attacked only with brute force. A bone spike tore through its shoulder, exposing it as nothing more than a beast in human form. With his body pierced by spikes, the mage declared it was far too weak to be called a masterpiece. Shocked by the defeat, the professor could not believe his creation had fallen so easily. He recalled his notes, which described how the creature absorbed the traits of its prey. Through that, it would continuously grow stronger, becoming the true neo-human, the ideal evolution of mankind. Yet even this so-called ideal had been defeated in a completely one-sided manner. The man realized the creature was still weak and even considered feeding it his own arm to restore its strength. With a new plan forming, he decided he would kill the mage to secure his escape. Suddenly, the young man pointed his staff at him and demanded to know where the experimental records were. He threatened that he would kill his child right there if the records were not handed over. With no choice, the professor complied, all while thinking this might be his chance to survive. He offered his research journal, claiming it would prove the worth of his work. The young man snatched the diary and flipped through it quickly. Immediately afterward, he threw it to the ground along with other notes, declaring he had no need for them. Confused, the man asked what he thought he was doing. The mage acknowledged the research's value, but he did not see why it should be discarded. With a stern look, the youth simply explained that it did not align with his own ideals. As the professor begged for his life, the mage glanced over the notes regarding the terrorist plan. He briefly considered questioning him about arc and gluttony, but quickly dismissed the thought. Hearing Jason's footsteps approaching, the mage decided he needed to end it all to avoid complications. He declared it was time to disappear, while the professor pleaded for another chance. Without hesitation, he cast Ignite, and the man was utterly consumed by flames. Moments later, the knight arrived at the scene and asked if Sir Asher was safe. Before the roaring fire, Asher confirmed his safety and asked about the assassin. Jason boasted that he had landed a solid strike, ensuring the enemy must be in far worse condition. While scanning a document, the mage understood from the evasive response that the target had escaped. At that moment, he realized the document in his hand was actually a map. As the knight asked about the fire, Asher noticed that the terrain on the map was near Martis. His attention then fixed on a red mark indicating a specific location. Suddenly, he was struck by a sharp pain in his head and bent forward under the impact. Recognizing the symptoms of mana exhaustion, he decided to withdraw for now. A few days after the professor's downfall, peace seemed to return to Martis with the exposure of his plan. Upon confirming the scientist's schemes, the mayor flew into a rage and placed the Knights of Martis on maximum alert. The warriors reinforced their defenses and announced they would seal a passage, but that was no longer his concern. His new concern now was the injection of mana expansion stimulants. By pushing his body to its physical limits with injections, he had condensed years of a mage's growth into just a few weeks. After the procedure, he breathed deeply to recover. He then declared it was time to move forward to the next stage, having reached rank 3 in the elemental magic system. In a dark hall, a figure seated upon a throne asked if the professor was dead. Holding a glass of wine, the man remarked that it was one irritating problem less to worry about. Upon learning that the mage had been responsible, he decided he would have to meet him personally. At the Knights of Martis training grounds, the sun shone brightly. Meanwhile, the young mage trained relentlessly with his new staff, honing his combat skills. Soon after, he recalled the location marked on the map, which turned out to be an old research facility. Hidden beneath a tree in the forest, the entrance could only be accessed with a mechanical device. Inside the facility, they found no significant forms of life other than rats and insects. However, they did discover an emblem shaped like a fang in the hide of a mubat known for its high resistance. Despite their search, no information about the group Arc or Gluttony was found at the site. Still, the sorcerer felt satisfied for having secured the valuable mubat hide and for preventing a catastrophe in Martis. Suddenly, a knight approached and informed him that the mayor was looking for him. At City Hall, the leader of Martis thanked him, acknowledging the great debt he owed. He then explained that thanks to the discovery of the plan, they had been able to capture the remnants of the faction hiding in the city. Shortly after, he asked for Asher's understanding in keeping his contribution a secret, and the mage agreed in order to avoid panic. Thus, he reflected on the importance of building his reputation to secure money and experience. By being recognized as the hero who saved the city, he expected to gain more opportunities, similar to what he had achieved in Pig's territory. With the discussion concluded, the mayor invited him to accompany him, revealing the true reason for keeping the incident secret. He led him to a vault where rare items purchased by the city or confiscated from criminals were stored. Upon entering, the place was revealed as the Vault of Magical Items, and the young man observed everything with curiosity. As a reward, the mayor offered him any item of his choice, explaining this was the true compensation for his efforts. The first option was a skillfully forged mithril sword, designed to be easily imbued with mana. Beyond that, the vault was filled with high-quality weapons and magical artifacts, and the mayor encouraged him to choose carefully. He realized that while there were many chances to build fame, opportunities like this were rare. With that, he asked permission to evaluate the equipment, and the mayor agreed, impressed by his caution. The first item he assessed was a sprout staff, which only offered minor bonuses. Next was a magic cloak, also inferior to what he already possessed. Additionally, a ring of recovery proved useful, but not enough to justify replacing his current gear. While considering his options, a subtle gleam in a display case caught his eye. Approaching, he picked up an unfamiliar ring with a green gem in its center. However, the item showed no reaction to his appraisal, suggesting it likely wasn't magical. The mayor reassured him not to rush and to find what he truly needed. The mage agreed to take as much time as necessary, while they slowly turned into night. Eventually, the mayor urged him to make a decision, noting how meticulous he was. Finally, the young man chose a protection necklace that held an automatic mana barrier. The mayor then asked about its mana consumption, but Asher assured him it wouldn't be a problem. Still, the local authority decided that one item alone wasn't enough of a reward, so he also offered the ring that had previously caught the mage's attention. Surprised, the young man listened as the mayor declared him the hero of Martis and insisted he accept the extra gift. When asked, the mage revealed he planned to remain in Martis a while longer to settle certain matters. With the mayor's offer of support, the scene shifted to a dark mine environ territory. Inside, a miner broke rocks with his pickaxe until he uncovered something unusual on the ground. He unearthed a human skull and shouted in shock at the sight. Another miner asked why he was yelling, but he explained that a normal strike of a pickaxe should have shattered it. Unimpressed, his companion simply kicked the skull aside to solve the problem. He then ordered him to grab his tool and get back to work so they could go home. Suddenly, the first miner pointed behind him, trying to warn of imminent danger. Dismissing it, the man insisted there was nothing there, only for a floating skull radiating a dark aura to appear right behind him. The skull quickly transformed into an undead skeleton wreathed in that energy. The miner screamed for everyone to evacuate the mine as the skeletons began attacking the others. In the chaos, the workers were swiftly overwhelmed and cut down by the creatures. Not long after, rumors spread of undead rising in Viron's mine. With the appearance of creatures that could not be killed, a state of emergency was declared in Viron. Reports from survivors spread, throwing the entire territory into panic. Meanwhile, the tragic story of Viron circulated from mouth to mouth. Soon, a messenger also arrived in Martis to report the incident. In time, the news reached the adventurer group in Verdun as well. During this period, the mage began teaching Iris about the art of enchantment magic. Finally, the learning process took an entire month to complete. Thus, a month passed since the subjugation of the professor amid a peaceful landscape. During that time, the young man learned enchantment magic with Iris while also training with an orc. With a warrior's enchantment, he leaped into the air and struck the enemy with his spear. Right after, he advanced swiftly, enhancing his strength, speed, and senses with magic. Dodging a blow, he demonstrated his mastery of the new abilities in real combat. Iris, watching in shock, remarked that a mage had just defeated an orc with his bare hands in only 13 seconds. As he caught his breath, she continued to observe him silently. Afterward, he thanked her for the lessons, but the mage responded that he was incredible and would have learned on his own. The warrior explained that he never could have done it without her help since all his books had been burned. As they walked, the young woman studied him carefully. Suddenly, he denied having any sort of problem, and she reacted in surprise, trying to explain herself. He then advised her to keep such thoughts to herself as he walked away. Back in the city, the mage insisted it was all a big misunderstanding. At that moment, a voice greeted him, calling him Lord Asher. Soon, Oscar, the guild master of Martis, revealed himself and announced he had a request to make. The young man immediately remembered that Oscar, the guild master of Martis, had overseen the investigation when he was falsely accused. Thus, he understood that the request was related to the rise of undead hordes in the Viron mines. Because of rumors of curses and diseases, no adventurer was volunteering for the mission. Oscar had sought him out knowing he had foiled a planned terrorist attack. Normally, he would have refused, but he accepted the mission, having spent his money in seeking more fame. As preparations began, some adventurers whispered about how unusual he was, a mage who trained in hand-to-hand combat. At that moment, Iris approached and asked him about the rumors, but he pretended to know nothing. He then asked her if she wasn't afraid of the undead, since her group would also be joining. She confidently replied that, as a graduate of the academy, silly rumors like that wouldn't affect her. She added that it would be a good opportunity, since they would be providing support from the rear, not fighting on the front lines. With a serious look, he simply said he hoped it truly would be a good opportunity, as she claimed. The next day, the expedition departed, a caravan traveling through the forest. Inside the carriage, other mages noted that he was using the flight spell continuously, keeping distance from the group. One of the female mages turned to Iris and asked what her relationship with the young man was, since they seemed close. With a flustered expression, the girl replied that they could be considered senior and junior. The mage then explained that during a dangerous mission, her group had been saved by him, and they had grown closer afterward. Flying at a distance, the young man seemed to notice something on the horizon. The other mage asked if they had attended the same academy, but Iris awkwardly replied that he was more like a teacher. Suddenly, the young man appeared at the carriage door and announced that a horde of undead was pursuing the people of Viron. Without hesitation, he declared he would go ahead to provide support and shot forward at high speed. Upon spotting the skeletal horde, he considered it the perfect opportunity for a test. He pulled out a grimoire, ready to see the results of the past months spent studying enchantment magic. The book was a rare tome he had stolen from the magic tower, capable of amplifying its user's magical power. It was an unregistered tome of elemental magic, in which he had inscribed a magic circle of connection. To test the connection, the young man prepared a spell of geographic manipulation. Unleashing the spell, he released a massive wave of energy across the battlefield to test its strength. Inside the carriage, the other mages were startled by the tremor as the undead horde was lifted from the ground. The young man clenched his fist, controlling the spell's power. In the next instant, giant stone hands crushed the skeletal horde completely. To finish, he prepared a dual cast with the flame element and launched a powerful fire attack. With the final strike, he unleashed an explosion that engulfed the entire field. The intense fire incinerated every last skeleton in the area. The group of mages watched in shock, wondering how he still had mana for spells of that level. Moments later, the young man landed amidst the destruction. He realized that the combination of his altered body and the power of the grimoire had produced the massive spell. Seeing the fissure he had created, he concluded that all the time invested had not been in vain. From afar, Iris watched, realizing his skill level was already far beyond that of a 4th level mage. Suddenly, a skeletal hand grabbed her shoulder from behind. A larger skeleton pinned her from the back, making her scream from the surprise attack. At that instant, a muscular man appeared and cleaved the enemy with a single strike of his cleaver. Iris and Locke stared silently at the newcomer, unsure of what had just happened. The stranger held up a necklace with the number 2 on it and asked about the situation. At the same time, another man searched for his prey, a platinum armored warrior wielding an axe. The brute turned to the group and asked why everyone was so quiet. Repeating his question about his quarry, he was soon identified as the butcher Galliarch. The mage told him that if he meant the undead, they were already all dead. The hunter reacted in disbelief, questioning how dozens of creatures could have been wiped out like that. He then recalled their report about the horde and found it strange that they had been exterminated without a single casualty. His gaze shifted to the young man, asking if he had done all of it alone. Galliarch approached and directly asked if that was his doing. The young man stared back with glowing eyes and responded with a challenge, asking what would happen if it were. The brute explained that he had been hired to hunt those undead, and that Asher had stolen his prey. In a tense confrontation, the man accused him of interfering with his work. With both cloaked in their auras, Galliarch declared that he would have to pay for it. Floating in the air, the young man asked what the equivalent price would be, voicing his curiosity. At that, Galliarch noticed he had widened the distance, choosing a mage's fighting position. Even without understanding, the boy stared at him seriously, considering the possibility of a clash. The brute then grinned, his eyes gleaming, declaring that this would be fun. One of the men warned Iris that he was being reckless trying to fight the butcher. He explained that Galliarch was extremely powerful and dangerous, having crippled a knight in a fit of rage. Shocked, the mage asked why the guild hadn't punished such a serious crime. The man confirmed there had been no punishment since the guild needed the brute's strength. Soon after, the mage Goat explained that the rules did not apply to a platinum rank like him, and the guild knew it. The ranger Nerian quickly asked Goat to stop with the explanations and help prevent the situation from escalating. The mage then stepped forward and asked Galliarch to calm down, explaining that the other group was only carrying out a mission. The butcher, however, suggested they could simply kill them and blame it on the undead, wanting to prove the difference in strength. Thus, Goat turned to the young man, remarking that he seemed confident in his abilities. With an aura of energy, he declared he would put him in his place, pressing him down with magical force. Even under the pressure, the youth identified it as no more than that of a 3rd level mage. Under the weight, he realized the technique was nothing but raw mana release, affecting everyone in the area. With his eyes glowing, he prepared to respond to the force pressing upon him. In the next instant, he broke through the magical pressure with ease and knocked Goat out with a single move. The brute watched in surprise, recognizing the mage was not weak. He concluded that this young man was far stronger than expected and asked his name. With his eyes still glowing, he simply answered that his name was Asher. With a smile, Galliarch bid him farewell, saying he would see him in Viron. The confrontation with the butcher's group ended faster than expected. Because their mission was to protect survivors, the Martis team ended up delayed in reaching Viron territory. After the clash with the platinum-ranked adventurer, the boy realized he had stepped onto the bad side of that group. The next day, Lord of Viron, Farned van Viron, thanked everyone for answering his summons. He then announced that Viron's troops would immediately march toward the mines. The mission's objective, with the support of the Moon Order, was to exterminate the undead army that had arisen. With Galliarch's group also present, he ended his speech by wishing that no lives would be lost. With Martis' dispatch team ready, he gave the order for all to depart. As they prepared for battle, the butcher approached and asked the young man if he was nervous. A companion advised him not to fight, but he replied that he would only respond if provoked, telling them to focus on the battle At a signal, the horde of undead surged toward the troops, and the battle began with a massive explosion. A commander ordered everyone to aim for the enemy's heads to ensure their destruction. He also warned that the bodies would regenerate if struck elsewhere, while calling for long-range support. Suddenly, a blood golem emerged from the mass, and a cleric ordered everyone to retreat before being crushed. The priest reinforced the warning, explaining that ordinary swords would not work against such a creature. Without hesitation, the brute leaped over the troops and charged alone in the Colossus. He faced the monster, identifying it as a blood golem. Calling it perfect for a warm-up, he launched himself into the attack with his fists. His strike landed with a fiery, powerful impact, yet the golem's body absorbed the blow without apparent damage. The butcher then tore the bloody creature's head off. A nearby lord remarked on the man's impressive strength, but wondered what he was trying to accomplish. With a confident smile, the brute grabbed the blood golem with one hand. Then, to everyone's shock, he hurled it far across the field. The piece of the monster crashed to the ground, right beside the young mage. With a disapproving look, he simply remarked on how rude the act was. The butcher then taunted him, asking if the power he had shown the day before had been just for show. As the golem began to move again beneath his feet, the brutes seemed to notice something. Without warning, the young man activated a terrain manipulation spell that shook the ground. Immediately after, he conjured a fireball for his next strike. With that, a massive fiery explosion engulfed the battlefield. Iris screamed in surprise, not understanding why he had cast two large-scale spells in succession. Amid the flames, the brute laughed, saying that despite appearances, the boy had a strong temper. He then declared with a grin that he liked that kind of attitude. The butcher challenged him to see which of them was stronger, but the young man only regretted that he hadn't been caught in the blast. With that, Galliarch proposed a contest to see who could kill more undead, and leaped into the midst of the horde. As a result, the subjugation force managed to reach the Viren mines with fewer casualties than expected. Because of the limited space, only a selected group of warriors was chosen to enter the mine. Inside, the brute praised him for the fight, but the young man simply asked him not to act friendly. From a distance, the mage God watched the scene, not understanding the butcher's interest in that boy. He then recalled the moment he had been easily knocked out by the conjurer's mana pressure. Back then, God remembered using his own mana pressure successfully. Even so, the memory of those glowing eyes and that serious expression returned to him. In an instant, he had been completely suppressed by the other's mana with shocking ease. From that, he concluded that even though they were on the same level, the boy was definitely hiding something. At the entrance to a deeper tunnel, one of the leaders announced that Viren's garrison would wait outside. The selected group gathered at the entrance, receiving wishes of good fortune for the mission. At the vanguard, the young man watched as Mirian, the ranger from Galliarch's group, took the lead. With precise skill, she detected and dispatched an undead with a surprise strike, proving her worth. Seeing everyone play their roles with efficiency, he understood the true advantage of teamwork. Even with the group's coordinated advance, the boy kept carefully observing the path ahead. Soon he sensed a dark aura emanating from the depths of the tunnel, drawing his attention. When they reached what appeared to be the end of the mine, one of the knights ordered everyone to stop. As he prepared to scan the area, a cleric urged the others not to fear and to trust in the blessings. Sensing hesitation, Iris approached and asked the young man if something was wrong. The brute appeared behind him and asked if he had also sensed the smell of death. He explained that though he couldn't pinpoint it, a powerful undead was close by. The boy confirmed that the butcher's intuition seemed correct and instructed the mage to stay behind him once the battle began. Hearing this, Iris asked what exactly was coming, but he simply replied he didn't know yet. Suddenly, a light appeared at the end of another passage, and some soldiers warned not to advance recklessly. The conjurer approached and asked Rox about the commotion. The knight explained that while checking other tunnels, they had found a light shining from the far end. The brightness at the corridor's end grew stronger. The discovery surprised him, for he knew there should be no exits other than the way they had entered. The light revealed itself as daylight, streaming from an unexpected opening in the mine's ceiling. When they reached the end of the tunnel, the soldiers were astonished at the new chamber they had found. The adventurer group quickly moved forward to investigate the newly discovered cavern. At the cavern's center, a skeleton sat atop a pile of bones, indicating the place was a tomb. One soldier recognized the crest on the skeleton's chest as the royal emblem of Estria. At that moment, Asher remembered his hidden identity and the fact that this land belonged to the Duchy of Riviente. Since Riviente had declared independence from the Kingdom of Estria, it was strange to find remnants of the old kingdom here. God immediately questioned the presence of such signs unless the place wasn't truly what they thought. Determined not to embarrass himself again, he resolved to investigate thoroughly, since his specialty was gathering information. The butcher, however, simplified the matter, saying they just needed to kill the creature to solve the problem. In response, God volunteered to deal with the undead, surprising the warrior with his initiative. He explained there was no need to bother the brute and that he would handle it himself. With a firm command, the sorcerer ordered the clerics to begin the purification ritual. At that moment, Asher understood that since the creature was a death knight, they could weaken it with purification. As the holy light enveloped the skeleton, it remained still and silent. Suddenly, a rain of stones fell from the ceiling, interrupting the ritual and startling everyone. Moments later, the creature's eyes flared with an intense red glow. It had awakened. Asher immediately sensed that the situation was about to change. In the blink of an eye, the skeleton advanced with astonishing speed, raising a cloud of dust. Its skeletal hand lashed out swiftly toward Goad, who was still on the ground. The mage turned back, shocked at the imminent strike. At the last second, the brute grabbed Goad and hurled him aside, intercepting the blow. The skeletal knight moved again, and the butcher realized this was no ordinary undead. A cleric then identified the creature not as a death knight, but as a wailing knight. The priest explained that though it was weaker, the true threat of the creature lay elsewhere. He revealed that the Wailing Knight had the dangerous ability to command other undead. Ready for battle, the warrior declared their course of action was now clear. With his staff glowing, Asher stated that the group needed to focus on taking down the Wailing Knight. But before that, he'd announced he would reshape the terrain to neutralize the enemy's numerical advantage. Not understanding, Iris watched as the ground began to quake beneath their feet. With the tremors intensifying, she screamed and asked what he was doing. The brute mocked him, asking if he was trying to claim the enemy all for himself. In response, Asher urged them to think rationally, reminding them there would be more than enough enemies for everyone below. With the assurance of plentiful foes to fight, the butcher readied himself for combat. Meanwhile, the rest of the group clashed with shadow mages, while the strategist declared he would handle the primary target. At the same time, the brute and the clerics positioned themselves to face the giant skeletons that appeared. Alone in another section of the battlefield, Asher slowly approached his opponent. At last, he stood face to face with the Wailing Knight. The Wailing Knight raised its sword ready for combat. Immediately after, the creature charged at high speed, while the mage prepared for the attack. He conjured multiple fire arrows that shot toward the skeletal knight. Fire was a strategic choice, as undead were weak against that element. Even while engulfed in flames, the enemy remained standing, so the conjurer decided to intensify his next strike. He used dual casting to prepare a more powerful spell. A barrage of searing heat arrows surged toward the opponent. Yet the creature blocked the attack with a single hand, stunning everyone. Seizing the opening, the young man prepared a fire spear for a direct strike. The spell pierced straight into the knight's chest with explosive force. The attack left a gaping hole in its body, but the skeleton showed no sign of damage. In the next instant, the opponent counterattacked, hurling its sword. From this, the sorcerer realized that a poorly executed block could shatter his mana barrier. The creature's descending strike left him completely exposed for the follow-up attack. As a last resort, he prepared a combination of Wave and Winter Burst. With a dual cast, he unleashed a powerful Glacier Breath that froze the knight. Immediately afterward, he resolved that if fire did not work, he would crush it with brute force. Focusing his mana, he readied a triple cast of Earth Spears for the next strike. The attack landed squarely on the enemy's head. Suddenly, the creature began radiating an aura of energy, murmuring that it needed to return. The mage watched in shock as the knight dodged his strike. In the next moment, he noticed that the creature's appearance had completely changed. Then he felt his mana draining away, at the worst possible time. As the enemy pulled back, he realized he would be defeated if the fight continued that way. At the last second, the warrior appeared and delivered a devastating punch to the creature. With his body spattered in blood, the fighter declared he wouldn't let anyone steal his main course. Elsewhere, a lich's head rolled to the ground defeated. A soldier promptly crushed the skull underfoot. Commander remarked that surviving against 3 liches had only been possible thanks to Narian. Goad complained to the commander for giving all the credit to her, and the man apologized, acknowledging his contribution. With the battle ending, Iris looked upward, wondering if everyone else was safe. Myrna quickly warned her not to worry about the others and to focus on finding a way out. Looking up at the hole in the ceiling, the group realized there was no escape, and if the conjurer was defeated, they would all be lost. Suddenly, the ground began to quake violently, catching everyone off guard. The terrain started to crumble and give way beneath their feet. On the surface, the warrior charged at the Wailing Knight, igniting the clash. With his fist wrapped in energy, he prepared a crushing strike. He unleashed a flurry of rapid punches that slammed into the creature's body. Yet the knight resisted and grabbed the fighter's face with one skeletal hand. Immediately after, the creature managed to recover its fallen sword. Meanwhile, above them, a brilliant light descended. In the next moment, the flash struck the creature directly. With an axe in hand, the brute delivered a kick that hurled it away. From the bottom of the pit, the group watched the battle, recognizing their 2 companions fighting together on the surface. The hulking man taunted the mage, asking how he could still be moving, his grin mocking. The conjurer told him to focus, while the other remarked that the creature was annoyingly resilient but fun. The strategist then instructed him to act as bait to align his strike, and the partner agreed to try his best. Following the plan, the warrior leaped high into the air, positioning himself directly above the knight. He came down with a destruction strike, creating a massive crater on impact. With a crushing kick, he shattered the enemy's skull into fragments. In the next second, the creature's body fully regenerated from the pieces. The skeleton then summoned multiple minions from the ground, who restrained the fighter. To aid him, the mage released an explosion of mana that disintegrated all nearby skeletons. The hulking man seized the opening and grabbed the knight's face with one hand. With a swift motion, he slammed it violently into the cavern floor. Suddenly, a voice shouted for him to get out of the way, startling him. The conjurer unleashed a massive fire explosion that engulfed the area. earning curses from his partner. From within the flames, the brute saw the creature's sword coming at him. He quickly defended himself with his knee and elbows. Looking up, he realized the enemy was now rushing toward the mage. Right before him stood the Wailing Knight, reaching out to seize him. With little else to do, he could only watch as the monster closed in. Suddenly, his protection necklace activated an automatic mana barrier to defend him. The creature struck him head-on, hurling him to the ground and causing a violent impact. At that moment, he recalled the mayor's warning about mana consumption, but fortunately, he felt no side effects. Even so, he realized his reserves were nearly depleted and his shoulder had been dislocated by the last blow. Despite this, the greater problems still loomed before him. Dark armor soon enveloped the knight's body, making it far stronger. At once, the clerics joined the battle, casting chains of light to restrain it. One of them remarked that such armor had never been recorded before, not even in the church's archives. The brute seized the moment, shouting for the priests to hold their ground. The creature then used the chains to yank the clerics toward it with overwhelming force, shocking everyone. With a roar, the giant man grabbed his companions to keep them from being dragged away, asking if they planned to die. He then ordered them to prepare to restrain the enemy once more. Seeing the opportunity, the bard prepared a spell to bring down the Wailing Knight with his performance. Determined to prove his worth, he hurled an earth spear at the creature. The skeleton, however, dodged the strike and countered with astonishing speed, landing a blow to the young man's neck. Seeing their ally struck, the brute and the mage turned as a cleric was ordered to heal him quickly. Soon, the adversary conjured an orb of energy, and the warrior stepped forward to intercept it. With a solid block, he managed to contain it while his companion watched from behind. The hulking fighter turned and demanded of the mage how long he would have to wait. He clarified that he was holding out for a massive strike, and asked how long his mana would take to recover. With his staff in hand, the conjurer replied that only a few seconds would be enough. The brute grinned at the answer. With a roar, he charged at the Wailing Knight, telling his ally to get ready. The creature braced itself for the warrior's onslaught. The fighter then shouted his plan to smash the pierce point and told the mage to target his magic there. In the next instant, he was struck by a crushing punch directly to the chest. Even as the blow dug deeper, the brute declared that a corpse ought to remain still. His fist then tore through the knight's body with immense force. The creature's armor shattered, leaving a hole in its chest. From afar, the mage observed the result of the strike, confirming that the plan had worked. The Wailing Knight, however, regenerated its arm and struck the warrior with a single devastating blow. The creature then raised its hand, brimming with energy, to finish off the fallen ally. The conjurer leaped in front of the brute to intercept the strike, declaring that he was its opponent. He then noticed that the hole in the creature's chest had not yet closed. He realized that focusing his magic on that spot was the key to victory. With conviction that he could defeat it, he dodged the creature's attack with a fiery burst. Suddenly, he turned and saw the group of adventurers approaching from behind. At once, he spotted his apprentice preparing a spell with her staff. The mage remembered telling the young woman that she had more talent for ice magic despite her lack of practice. She had promised to do her best not to embarrass him, and he had praised her for her effort. Back in the present, a powerful fire spell struck the Wailing Knight squarely. Seizing the moment, the conjurer clenched his fist with energy and declared that victory was theirs. Hey everyone, did you enjoy the story? I really liked it. If you want to follow the next part, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. See you in the next story, guys.